Well, I think it's probably a sign that the 28-point plan has been whittled down and a lot of the pro-Russia bias has probably been removed during the negotiations at this time in Florida, have been led by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who is far more pro-Ukrainian than many of the others in the administration. So I think the language he used is that there probably isn't a quick solution here, notwithstanding the progress that has been made. And he's probably very cautious about whether he would indicate if Russia would agree to this. We've seen no indication at this point in time that they will.
And the U.S. delegation included people with strong political backgrounds but limited military expertise. Ukraine, meanwhile, arrived with Umerov, Budanov, Bogdanov, essentially the entire security and intelligence brain of our country. Does this asymmetry worry you?
Well, I think what the Ukrainian president did with that delegation was to send people who could explain to the Secretary of State exactly what the war situation was, not the kind of inevitable victory propaganda that they're getting from their interlocutors in Moscow. I mean, the General Budanov, I believe, was a last-minute withdrawal, and his deputy, General Skibitsky, was sent. This is a very knowledgeable man, a very clever officer who knows in depth where the war is, what the current situation and the challenges are, and is able to explain that to his American interlocutors. I think that's very important.
But how much do the gaps and experience within Trump's negotiating team increase the risks for Ukraine? Any risks?
Well, I don't think there's a huge amount of gaps in negotiating experience. I mean, Steve Witkoff is a real estate agent. He has zero experience in international diplomacy. Marco Rubio has been in the job for about 10 months. Many of those in the Ukrainian delegation have been negotiating with Americans, Europeans and Russians for years. So, I think the Ukrainian delegation isn't just experienced in military and intelligence matters. You've got a pretty fair set of negotiators there as well.
And in one of your pieces, you said that dictator Putin is once again claiming that Ukraine's government is illegitimate. Is this preparation to promote some alternative negotiator or just another attempt to delegitimize the Ukrainian state?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. Firstly, it's Putin just rolling out a standard talking point that he's been using ever since there was a decision made not to have another presidential election at the 5-year mark. Now, that made enormous sense to do that because all that would happen is Russia would target Ukrainians voting. And it's not possible under martial law in Ukraine anyway. So I think part of it is just rolling out that standard propaganda talking point. But secondly, I think from a Russian and a Putin perspective, it gives him the ability to knock back, to say no to any prospective peace deal because he doesn't trust the Ukrainian side to hold up their end of the bargain, which, as we all know, is very ironic. Putin would think that. He has never held up a single bargain about a single conflict that he's involved Russia in.
Yes. But dictator also insists that Russia's military is accelerating its progress. From your perspective, is that a real assessment or an information operation aimed at influencing the peace talks?
It's purely an information operation influencing not so much the peace talks. This is aimed directly at Donald Trump, the Vice President of the United States, Steve Witkoff, and the others around them who are not pro-Ukraine, who have a very strong Russia bias and want to see this war over so they can return to making deals and making money.
Yeah, and one more interesting. The resignation of Andrei Yermak is now being used by both Russian propaganda and some American isolationists. Do you see a real risk that this corruption scandal could be used in Washington as a reason to reduce support for Ukraine?
There is certainly that risk, and that's something that Ukraine and its partners will have to work hard to make sure that doesn't eventuate. But on the other side of this is an indication that democracy in Ukraine is working. If it was Russia, those kind of corrupt individuals or those who are alleged to be corrupt would never have surfaced. So, in some respects, this is an indication that Ukrainian democracy is at work here and is something that's worth preserving.
Yeah, I was reading, you said it's institutional maturity. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Ukraine, in its current manifestation, is a very young democracy, and it's still learning some of the tough elements of being a democracy, but it's doing it in a more transparent way than many other countries are doing. And as we saw when there was a chance that the government anti-corruption agency might be shut down, Ukrainians came out for the first time during the war this time and protest. So, I think there's a very strong inclination towards democracy among the Ukrainian people, and we need to support that.
But also, General Ryan, how critical was Yermak's role in the negotiations?
Well, no doubt he was an important player because he was or has been at the right hand of the president for the entirety of this war. Probably no one knows how Zelensky thinks, what he might tolerate, what he won't tolerate in talks better than Andrei Yermak. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of other servants of Ukraine who work for the president, who are able to negotiate with the Americans in good faith whilst retaining the trust of the president of Ukraine, and we shouldn't forget that.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to get back to negotiations and Umerov, Budanov, and other security leaders now leading the delegation. Could this be read as a signal that Ukraine is preparing for, to fight as long as it needs, not for any compromises ever?
No, I think the president of Ukraine has been very careful in his signalling to the American president, particularly since that 28 February disaster in the Oval Office. He's been very keen to say that Ukraine is not going to stand in the way of peace, but at the same time, it's not going to support peace at any cost. And I think most of the polls in Ukraine, speaking to Ukrainian people, support that. Ukrainian people all want peace, but Ukrainian people don't want it at the cost of having to live under the boot of the Russians. So, President Zelensky has a very fine tightrope to walk here. He has to be seen in the eyes of Donald Trump to be not standing in the way of peace, but he has to be seen in the eyes of every Ukrainian of supporting the aspirations for Ukraine to remain a sovereign nation that can defend itself.
General Ryan, given the situation on the battlefield, which is quite complicated, are we now entering the most difficult phase of the war?
Well, I think the amount of challenges that are piled up for the president and the government and the military of Ukraine are probably the most difficult since the full-scale invasion in February 2022. If you add up this second corruption scandal, this pressure from America for a quick peace deal, Russia is certainly putting pressure on Ukrainian units on the front line, particularly around Pokrovsk, but also on the Liman and Kupiansk axes. But you're also seeing Russian production of weapons step up and American military aid decline significantly. So all of these add up for what is a very difficult period of the war for the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people. But, the Ukrainian people have proven throughout this war to be highly resilient, innovative, and just very, very tough at defending their homes, defending their country.